Cool. So real quick, because I think we have like half new people here today. How many people is like this your first Mastery Monday? Actually, more than half. Yeah. So like most people is okay. This is like our 17th one, and we kind of build on top of each one. Okay, of the new people, how many of you are like very new to poker? You're not new to poker, like. Okay, but others are like, do you understand like what game theory optimal strategy is, or like pre-flop ranges? If anything I just said there is not familiar, then like, okay, cool. Okay. Okay.
You'll
this
see
is
later.
Then what I'll just say for those who did raise their hand is like some of this stuff will probably be a little advanced for you, and so like. One, feel free to ask questions, but also you can pull me aside after. We're kind of like diving deeper into the game tree today because so basically like there's various like stages or like streets. So we kind of covered pre-flop before, we've covered flop, and today we're going to be mostly focusing on turn strategy. Again, if that doesn't make sense, I'll like pull you guys aside later tonight and we can just chat a bit more about that. But yeah, we'll kind of jump in. But really kind of like these sessions are just about getting this whole community better at poker, honestly. Like everyone's here to play poker, which we'll get to do tonight for many hours. But I think we all benefit as a community the more that we get to play. Get coaching and get better at poker. So let's just jump right in. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to really be covering turn barreling logic. We're going to talk about turn sizing a bit. What sizes to use when you do bet the turn, and then we'll have a couple examples to walk through, which I'll ask you guys whether you think we should or shouldn't bet turn. And then we'll talk a bit about donk betting the turn, which has anyone not heard of the term donk betting before? Okay, so a decent amount of people. So we'll cover what donk betting is, and you'll see donk betting on flops as well as turns, but we'll kind of cover some properties that'll be important when you think about doing this. So again, for the newer folks, this is all just to kind of like help you better think about, like, instead of just like blindly betting or bluffing or value betting, just thinking more intentionally about what cards, what boards you want to bet on, generally speaking, and what runouts are good for you versus good for your opponent. So we'll jump in, and again, pause me at any time. Oh, sorry, that is not relevant. Okay, cool. So I'll start with my first question, and all of this today, just take with the assumption that we are the pre-flop aggressor. So we raise from the button, and then the opponent called in the big blind. That's going to be the standard formation we have across all the examples and all the questions here. So first question is, assume that we bet flop, and we just got called on the flop. So we bet flop, we got called. What are the properties that make it, that are good properties for us on the turn, that will make us want to bet again once we get checked to? Brick turn, yeah. So something that doesn't really change the dynamic of the board. Maybe no like draws complete or anything like that. Any other properties?
Broadway cards. Better for
Broadway cards, yes. So like over cards to the board, basically, that favor our range of hands. Yep. What else do you guys think? No, Mr. GTO, no?
I never bet turn, so that's why I like.
You never bet turn? Oh, I guess you always go all in pre-flop, so
Yes,
you never get to the turn.
This makes it so much easier.
Fair. Yes, go ahead.
Hitting the nuts on the turn.
Yeah, I mean, so if you have like if you have a great hand that wants to kind of go for 3 streets of value, then you're gonna probably bet flop, bet turn, bet river. So actually having a good hand, yeah.
Geometric betting, trying to get it all in by the end.
Yeah, so this is gonna be, that's more related to sizing. So Derek's talking about this concept of geometric betting, which is basically using the same sizing across flops, turn, and rivers to kind of get all the money in smoothly. And when we say same sizing, I mean as a percentage of the pot. So if you're going to bet 50% pot on the flop, 50% pot turn, 50% pot river, it's a smooth way where you don't have to do too much math to basically get all the money in with your best hands, but then also obviously mix in with some bluffs. Yeah. Anything else? Anything else you guys think we missed?
Range advantage.
Range advantage, yep. So if a card comes that is within your perceived range, yeah, for sure. So what about from an equity perspective? What do you guys think? How, like, from an equity perspective with our exact hand, what are some good properties? Like, let's say we bet on the flop with some like backdoor draws as one of our bluffs. What kind of cards do we think we want to continue betting on the turn with?
The ones that increase our equity. So if it's like if you get a flush draw, straight draw.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely cards that increase our equity. So I think we covered a bunch of them, but basically, so we talked about range, and again for the newer folks, when what we mean by range here is basically whenever you're playing poker, you're gonna always, every decision you make kind of like reduces the range of possible hands that you could potentially have, both you and your opponent. So in poker, you generally don't want to be thinking in kind of like your exact cards. You always want to think about what your perceived range of hands could be, but also what your opponent's range of hands could be. So generally speaking, when we're the pre-flop aggressor, meaning we were the one who raised pre-flop, if overcards come to the board, these are good cards for us to continue betting on to represent that we have an ace, a king, or a queen. So a lot of time when we choose to flop bet with kind of like as a bluff, we should be choosing combos that have some sort of backdoor equity. So when we pick up that equity and our equity increases, so now we have a straight draw or a flush draw on the turn, those are some natural cards that we want to keep barreling on. We have good blockers to strong hands. So if some sort of draw completes, like let's say flush draw is complete, but maybe we have like the ace of hearts and there's 3 hearts on the board, we want to be able to block those strong hands and be able to represent those strong hands ourselves. Villain's range is weak / cap. So in this scenario, I mentioned that we just got check called on the flop. So under the assumption that a lot of Villain's best hands are going to check raise us on the flop. So generally when they just check call, so their range will be weak / capped. And generally will be, I mean, this is kind of a symptom of us betting on the turn, will be sort of polarized. So we're going to have really strong hands or good bluff candidates. And I think this point is really important because I've seen a lot of players bet medium strength hands on the turn, especially like one pair kind of hands that generally can't get 3 streets of value. They're just not good enough. And this is a big mistake that like recreational players will make, is you kind of overplay medium strength hands. So I would say with your, especially a generalization, like one pair kind of hands, generally speaking, you're not going to want to bet 3 streets. So you will kind of see a classic like bet flop, check turn, and then maybe bet river depending on what the run out is. But probably a lot of folks are not going to be checking turn enough with their medium strength hands. So if you're going to be betting turn, you generally want to make sure that you do actually have a polarized range. So you're going to do it with your best hands like sets, 2 pairs, flushes, straights, etc. Or really good bluff, like your bluff candidates that have really good equity. So these are properties that make you want to bet the turn as the pre-flop aggressor, and assuming that you bet the flop. Conversely, what do you guys think are properties or cards that come where you want to check? Where you don't want to keep betting? Yeah.
You waiting for them to improve.
What do you mean by that? Waiting for what
Let's
to
say
improve?
you have like a pocket 2s and you hit a set, and you're like, okay, well, I want to give them something to bluff into.
Got you. So I guess you're talking about like slow playing on the turn. I would generally, for recreational players, caution against slow playing. Where you're going to make most of your money and I'm not saying like as a blanket just never slow play, but where you're going to make most of your win rate in poker is just winning big pots with good hands. So like it's not going to be by pulling off crazy bluffs. It's like usually poker can be very simple sometimes, where you have a good hand, you bet that good hand, and you get paid, and you just know how to extract the maximum value. I would, especially when you like hit a set or something like that, like I think there's very few scenarios where I would slow play in position, unless it's like super dry, or like you have quads, for example, and it's just like really hard for your opponent to have anything like of value to call you with, or for you to get 3 streets of value. But if you have a set and there's like some semblance of like flush draw, straight draw, or something on the board, or they could have, it's like a low set and they could have like top pair or something like that, like I would just bet, honestly, a lot of the time. That would be probably a standard hand. I would just try to go for 3 streets of value. Yeah. What else? What properties do you guys think exist for us to want to check on turns?
good for big blind range, the turn card.
Good for big blind range. What kind of cards would you think would be good for the big blind range?
So straight complete, flush complete,
Yeah.
and some middle card pair up.
Yeah, draws completing, paired boards. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. So the cards that you don't want to keep betting on is when a board pairs. So let's say the flop is like, I don't know, Jack 7 deuce, and then a 7 comes on the turn. Generally speaking, you're gonna a lot less often want to bet this turn, because if they were calling with a Jack, they're gonna feel a lot more comfortable. They're also gonna call with a 7 a lot of the time on the flop, and now they have trips. And they're probably gonna have a lot more trips than us. If we're the pre-flop aggressor, they're gonna have a lot of offsuit 7x, 7-8 off, 7-6 off, etc. Whereas we don't have really any of those as the pre-flop aggressor. So yeah, especially when the middle sort of card pairs as opposed to like the top card pairs. When draws, like front door draws complete, so if there's a flush draw or straight draw on the flop that now has completed on the turn, we're going to be checking a lot of these unless we kind of like block. As I mentioned, like when we have blockers to the nuts on some of these, when we have no equity, so we had a bunch of backdoor draws on the flop and none of those came through on the turn, just check, give up, like we don't necessarily have to fight for these. No relevant blockers, and then more exploitatively if villain is kind of sort of like is really sticky or a calling station. So yeah, any questions on this? Properties, good properties for betting turn, or bad properties for or where you want to check on turn. Okay, cool. So actually, before I go to this, what do you guys think? And hopefully you didn't see that, but like, what do you guys think about turn sizings and what sizings you want to use? Also, Dennis, Jack, if you guys want to grab a seat, you can pull up a couple more chairs. There's one in there as well. Polarize. Yeah, so like using so polarized sizing, big sizing. Cool. Why? Why do you think we want to use a big sizing?
Like make your opponents indifferent.
Yeah, I mean, yes, which is the general purpose of like GTO strategy, is like you want to really drive indifference for your opponents.
Yeah.
So if you make the size too small, then they have really good odds to kind of realize their equity. Whereas you want to make it like a size large enough where they're kind of like indifferent between calling or folding. Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments on turn sizing? So, yeah, that generally is the main idea. Is generally we want to bet big on turns, whereas a lot of flops we're going to be betting small. On turns, we definitely want to size up, usually at least 75%, and you're actually going to see a lot of overbetting on turns, so like more than 100% of the pot. And this is mainly because we talked about what are the good properties for us to want to bet turns. A lot of our medium strength hands want to check on turns and just pot control. So when we are betting, usually we have a really good hand or a bluff. So that's what it means to have a polarized range. Either you have like a really good hand or you have like garbage, but maybe has some equity in terms of draws. And whenever we're betting with a polarized range, we always want to use a big size. So we have a polarized range. We want to go for a big size. Generally, the villain's going to be pretty capped because they just check called the flop and then they check to us on the turn. And then, yeah, so like if the board has draws, I mean, generally, if the board has draws, you're going to maybe want to size up a little bit and then maximize fold equity. And then also really kind of setting up our sizing for a river shove. So the turn is kind of like a major turning point where we're really kind of like representing we're representing that we're eventually going to go for a river shove. Like all our good hands are going to basically want to go all in on the river and maximize the value that we can get. So you can play around a bit with your turn sizing to make it get to around like a SPR, so a stack to pot ratio of like around 1 on the river. So maybe you have to go like 150% pot to sort of get there based on like the sizing you used on the flop. But yeah, that's the general concept with turn sizing. Do you guys think we ever use a smaller size on the turn, and what would be the scenarios that you would if you do?
At a low SPR, you might use a small turn sizing. Unless you're planning on going like a 2 streets of value. If you're just planning to play a 2-street game where you get everything in on the turn, you may choose to use a small sizing on the turn and then get everything in on the river.
That's a good point. Yeah. So low SPR. So this is if like you started, if you arrived at the flop and SPR is like, I don't know, like you have 100 in your stack and there's like 50 in the pot. And you can go geometric there and it's maybe like 33%. I don't know the quick math off the top of my head. But you're going like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and you basically get all in by the river. So yeah, when the stack to pot ratio is super low. Yeah. Any other scenarios that you guys think we might go smaller?
When you have the range and the net advantage, maybe you can go smaller.
Yeah, when exactly. So when like the board is like super dry, the turn is like there's really no more like draws, and you just like it's super dry. You can kind of just go and like you can start to take some of your maybe more like middling equity hands or like your one pair like good kicker and just try to go for like thin value basically. You can go smaller and represent a wider range. Just know that when you do go smaller, when SPRs aren't low, you're not necessarily representing a polarized range anymore. So you get to expand your value betting threshold. You're also going to be wanting to balance that with a few more like bluff combos as well. So it depends on certain board runouts where you can use a smaller sizing. But generally speaking, it's you'll want to default to a large sizing. Yes.
Would you ever bet smaller as a blocker bet if you do have some equity you can realize on the river? Or?
So when you're in position, it's not really a blocker bet. Like the most common, so usually you're using blocker bets when you're out of position. So it's mainly an out of position concept where you are betting a small size. Like for example, a very classic blocker bet situation is when you're on the river. Maybe you check called flop, you check called turn, and then you go for like 10% pot and you lead into the opponent. And then usually like the hand that you'll want to do this with is some sort of like middle or like low pair where you could actually have value sometimes. It's kind of mergy because you might actually be beating some of their ace highs or their bluffs and that it might still call with. But also if they have like middle or top pair or something like that, like they're not really going to want to raise you. So instead of you having to check call like a 60 or 70% bet on the river, you could just lead for 10%. And it can be like really, really effective against certain opponents. But you don't really have a blocker bet in this situation when you're in position on the turn. It's not really a blocker bet because you're not blocking anything when you're the one who's in position. You're kind of, you have the betting lead basically. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions on this? Yes.
So you're talking about when you're facing a calling station, would you still use the same sizing against someone you know is going to call no matter what you do?
If I know somebody's going to call no matter what I do, and they're playing a very unbalanced strategy, then that's where I start to deviate from GTO myself, and I don't need to play necessarily a balanced strategy. I probably just like never bluff, and then yeah, if I would just go bigger. Like if I know they're calling no matter what, then I would just size so I can bet, big turn, and then I get all the money in on the river, and probably just never bluff. Like if I have any of like my draws, I just check and then try to realize my equity, and then yeah. Cool. Okay, I think I've got a couple. Okay, so now we've got a couple scenarios to walk through, which is, so again, this is all under the assumption that we raised on the button pre-flop, we got checked to on the flop from the big blind, and then we bet flop. Yes. Is there
What's up with the 10?
It is, so ignore all the middle ones. So for those who come to the last few, I generate all these with AI and it usually mixes up the suits. But just pay attention to the immediate suit under the letter. I think there's a few more of that might pop up. But yeah, so we got check called on the flop and then we got check to on the turn. And basically now we're determining if this turn card, when we're checked to again, is a card that we want to bet, and then why or why not. Let's take a stab, yeah.
I think bet it because we have more kings in our range. We do have the draw to a straight now, and then they might have some backdoor diamond flushes as well to call it.
Mm-hmm. Cool, yeah. Anyone else? Other thoughts, opinions? Anyone think we shouldn't bet? Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
I was gonna say like, you could have the nuts, or you also could be. This is like well and truly a bluff, but you have ace high, so you're kind of in that position where you have the range advantage, but also you're not screwed if they do call because you still could hit a jack and get the nuts.
Yeah, so you're saying this we should bet this turn. Yeah. Does anyone think we shouldn't bet this turn? Okay. Yeah, well, so generally speaking, we're going to want to bet this turn. So it covers a bunch of the properties that we mentioned, which are good, which is one, it's an overcard to the board, like ace, king, queen, etc. Like we have a lot more of those. Like in this case, where we raised with the hand we were supposed to pre-flop. We bet on the flop, which we won't bet 100% time on this flop, but we'll definitely betting a decent amount of time because we've got a ton of backdoors. We've got backdoor straight draws, we've got backdoor flush draws, and then a card comes on the turn where our direct equity also improves because now we realize one of those backdoor draws, and then we're also blocking some of their like better hands on here. Like we block king queen that just calls pre-flop, and maybe like king queen that had some other king queen off that had like some spade backdoors, for example. So anyways, we block some of their pairs that might want to call here. So this is a pretty natural like turn bill for us. What do you guys think about on this one? So we've got queen nine of hearts, jack 7-3, and then another three comes on the turn. And then maybe somebody who hasn't answered before, but anyone from the back, if you guys have thoughts. No? Check, bet, what do you guys think?
Check board paired.
So you think check?
Yeah.
Why?
The board paired and you didn't improve.
Board paired, we didn't improve. Yeah.
I would be doing a lot of betting here. Personally, because queen high, it does not have a lot of showdown, so I'm probably losing this unless I don't improve on the river. And this is a really difficult board to connect with. It's unlikely that the three helped my opponent that much, so I would probably also be betting this and maybe checking some of my ace highs.
Cool. So you think betting? Without checking. Anyone else? Other thoughts?
Like you don't block anything. Like you don't have it's an extra spade. You know, one more spade, backdoor spades could get there.
Mm-hmm.
And just check this.
Yeah, we unblock spades, so there are some hands that he might call with, or they might call with, that now pick up extra equity with spade backdoors. So we unblock some of their hands that will call us on the turn. We block some of their hands that would check call flop and then check fold, auto fold turn, like 8-9, 9-10, like some of these kind of hands. So I would say generally we want to be checking this turn and just giving up. I mean, yeah, Johnny, 100%. Like we've got queen high, and like we always got like dust here. But I think this would just fall into my like give up category. I think we just don't really have enough going for us. I mean, maybe if we had like the queen of spades, at least, that we could, maybe a spade comes and we have, because like if we bet here on the turn, thinking ahead, and this is the main thing is like you always want to be planning ahead. So when you're betting the flop, you want to think about what cards on the turn are you going to be betting or shutting down. And then similarly, if we're betting the turn, what cards on the river are we going to be shutting down or betting? So like if you were to bet this turn, like what cards would you want to bet on the river? Like
It would be a give up on the river. It would absolutely be a give up because what I'm trying to do is get them to fold king highs and ace highs. Also, yeah, like, but this is absolutely like one of the worst hands that I would be betting here. Yeah,
Gotcha.
without plans to improve, it's just to get them to fold out and then probably check it on the river as a give up.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a really good is like if you think about, okay, I bet this on the turn and I just have like my plan for this street, and then if they call then I'm just like shutting down, then I would probably say generally you don't want to bet the turn because you want to have optionality. At every street you want to have optionality, and like I want to think about what are the clear cards that come that I will continue my story on the river. And there are just like no good cards. Like we don't have anything that we could represent here. Like yeah, and the board pairing, like they are gonna call us as well with like 3-4 suited sometimes. Like, I mean, out of the big blind, if we're playing, like at reasonable stack depths, like they're going to be calling with every suited combo that contains a 3. So they are gonna have 3s, like especially like, well, I guess a spade came here, so maybe not the spade backdoors. But imagine if that weren't a spade, then they would have like ace 3 suited, king 3 suited, queen 3 suited, all the suited 3s basically that would be calling. So they are gonna have way more 3s than we do. So generally speaking, this is just like this is generally speaking a give up. Okay. What do you guys think on this one? So we've got 8-9 of clubs. Flop is queen 6-7 rainbow, and then turn is 2 of clubs.
Overbet.
Overbet. Okay. Why?
Not range advantage. And improve. And turn is a brick.
Okay. So range advantage. So you think because we have the range advantage, you think because our equity improves and it's like relatively a brick on the turn. Okay. Anyone else?
I would also definitely, I'll definitely be betting this one. We have, what is it, 9 high, and we've got a combo draw, and we want to get a lot of better hands to fold, and we have a huge chance of making a super strong hand by the river. So this would be probably a pot size bet or bigger, I would imagine.
Does anyone think we should check? No? Everyone likes bet? I see maybe. Rob, what do you think? What? Yeah.
I think you can mix. You have a lot of equity and you can show up with an unexpectedly good hand on the river, especially if the club completes. As well, you're not going to get better flush draws to fold, and if you bet here and your flush completes, you're often going to be dominated. As well, here, I don't think you necessarily need to use a big size, because with 9 high, if you're just getting jack high to fold, you get better hands to fold. So if you go with like a 65 to 75% bet, you're accomplishing what you want to, and you're also getting some money in if you hit your draw.
So you're saying you would go for a smaller size if you were choosing to bet?
Well, I would mix, but yeah. Like
Okay.
you could definitely go big because you have so much equity, but yeah, you can go small because you're just getting better hands to fold all the time.
Okay.
Another point is that you don't mind bet calling. If the opponent were to shove, we have enough equity to just call off, which means that I don't really mind getting shoved on. If this was a weaker draw, maybe I would check it back and try to realize my equity.
My logic, I don't know if this logic is valid or not, but
Sure.
in my range I should have like ace queen or something like that. But I don't. I have 8-9 suited, which is what I think my opponent could have, but I have it. So that'd be the hand that I'd be worried about, which I know they don't have. I have it. So I should be pretty comfortable and I should bet.
Because you're saying you block them, yes, so because we have draws, we have like 2 draws here. We're blocking some of their hands that have draws, and you're saying because we block those draws, you would be more inclined to bet.
Yeah, like 8-9 suited is like the scariest combo draw hand that I would hate to face, if I didn't have ace 9 suited. But I know that they can't have it, right?
So generally when we're blocking our opponent's draws, it means that their range is going to be weighted a bit more towards value, which actually will want us to probably check more. So like if we were, because we're now taking a bunch of like 8-9 offsuit from their range away, we're taking some of the clubs that they might have, like ace 9 of clubs, ace 8 of clubs, that could fold to a turn bet. So when we do have those hands, that would actually push us more towards wanting to check when we block their draws.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say mostly here we want to bet, and we want to bet big. So we've got a lot of equity. It probably does mix a bit in theory. I would say like if we bet and then somebody jams on us here, it is pretty gross. Like we've got so much equity. I think in theory you're supposed to fold. I don't think you have enough. It's just so gross to fold when you've got like open ender, because you've got 8 plus 7, 15 outs. So you've got 30% equity, but it's generally not going to be enough if like somebody's going for like a big jam over like your bet. So it's pretty, because of that reason, when you have like super high equity draws that are kind of really sad. So this is something that our coach Andrew Moreno says all the time, is like, you kind of want to avoid situations where you're just like really sad, and you want to put other people in positions where you can make them sad. And by sad we mean like they've got a lot of equity that they just can't call with. And I would say like if we bet big turn here and we get jammed on, like I would be pretty sad, but I would probably fold. So because of that alone, like there are going to be, like in some scenarios I will want to just kind of like check and realize my equity. And then obviously if we brick, we can bluff river sometimes here if we like check turn and then brick rivers. But also I'd probably be just giving up a lot, because we've got a ton of, like, again, because we block a lot of the draws, because we have the draws in our hand. So what hands are we trying to get to fold on the river? But basically this one's a bit of a mix, but mostly betting. It's definitely going to be mostly betting and mostly going for the large size. We've got a ton of equity. We want to kind of like play for stacks, especially if we hit our draws, any of our straight draws or our flush draws. Any questions about this one?
Even our 8 and 9 could potentially be good.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, our 8 or 9 could also be live outs potentially. So like if we hit, our 8 or 9, I think it's a pretty natural check back. They might show up with a hand like, they might have like 5-4 of clubs or something like that, or not 5, sorry, 6-5 of clubs.
King 7.
Yeah, king 6, king 7, king, like they might have flush draw as well with a pair, or just be a non-believer. Like they're definitely supposed to be calling us sometimes on the turn with even just like a 7 or a 6. So yeah, definitely our 8 or 9 could be good as well sometimes. Cool. So I think this will be the last topic. Just quick time check. What are we looking at? 6:42. Okay. So donk betting turn. So the definition. So now we're kind of flipping the formation where we're now out of position. So let's say button raise. We're in the big blind. We check call the flop, and then now we're deciding. Donk betting is basically us taking the betting lead and choosing to bet out on the turn. What do you guys think are the properties that want to drive us to donk bet on the turn, and what are the questions we should be asking ourselves?
You're saying after one check.
After check call on the flop. So we check call the flop bet, and then now we're deciding whether or not to donk bet the turn. What do you guys think? How many of you guys incorporate donk betting into your turn strategy? Okay. I think everybody should be incorporating donk betting into their turn strategy. So that's good. So you guys will hopefully learn something here about how to think about it. But sorry, somebody was that?
Yeah. When the cards that are better for your range in the big blind, like cards that change the left on the board, you should be betting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So like, yeah, generally speaking, like think about the inverse of kind of like the cards that would be great when you're the in position player would have been betting, and then and think about boards that they're going to be checking back a lot. These are going to be kind of the boards that now we want to consider donk betting on. So like kind of the questions to ask us is like, so yeah, what factors drive our donk betting strategy? But how would in position respond to the turn donk bet? Do we think population find? Actually, sorry, before we even ask these questions, basically the properties would be like if we go back to what were the hands, what were the things that we would check back on? So paired boards, for example. Paired boards is a pretty classic donk bet, because especially like a middling card, because we can represent that a lot more often than our opponent. If a flush draw completed, straight draws completed. So you want to do that sometimes when you actually have those hands, but then also, of course, with your like strongest, like highest equity bluffs, you're gonna want to mix in sometimes. And then donk betting doesn't happen too often, so this is where you also want to really be thinking about the population and also thinking a bit more exploitatively of like how we think our opponents are going to respond to donk betting as well. So we kind of know, we address like what are the factors. So first, like we address, okay, this is a card that we can donk bet on, but do we want to? Do we want to donk bet, or how often? First off, like there's very few, or we kind of never have a 100% donk bet. It's always kind of mixed with the hands that we want to do it with. But then how do we think this person's going to respond is really important. Like, are they going to call? Are they going to play back at us a lot? Because most folks who have studied will generally know if we're donk betting on a turn card that we're supposed to donk bet on, let's say like a paired board, they're not supposed to be raising us a lot. But I would say maybe recreational players will have some raises in there that really makes kind of like our donk betting a little less effective and kind of like really annoying to play if we get played back against. And then this is kind of thinking if you're an in-position player, like generally speaking, the population doesn't really find many donk bets that they should, both on flops and on turns. So when you do see that, especially in recreational pools, like kind of really thinking, what does this mean or what does this signal about this person? Are they going to be way more weighted? They're generally going to be pretty unbalanced if we're thinking more exploitatively. Either they're going to be very, very weighted towards value or like just almost like very weighted towards bluffs, especially if they're not studied. Yeah, I think that's it. I didn't have examples prepared for donk betting, but any questions on donk betting?
It's donk betting overlaps with someone's check raising range on the flop, in the sense that, for example, some of the hands that you would naturally want to donk, you may have also chosen to check raise on flop. So interesting to think, like for example, some of your best flush draws are potentially going to be check raising flop. Some of your straight draws, so interesting, like the strategy of like what you would put into your check raising range on flop versus your check call donk range on turn. It can get a little complicated.
Yes. Yeah, so I think it becomes really interesting with, exactly, to your point, like with poker strategy, where especially, I think more so, what hands you choose to donk bet on the flop is going to really overlap with what hands you choose to check raise on the flop. So, like if a flop, and particular flops that we have donk bets on are like, kind of like low connected boards, like 5, 6, 7, 2 diamonds, for example. Or low paired boards, like 5, 5, 3. Where we have a lot more of the trips, we have a lot more of like the straights, sets, etc., flushes, because we're going to be calling with like every like suited combo. So those are the kind of boards that we're going to be donk betting sometimes, but then also can choose to check raise sometimes. And then to your point as well, like with those same hands, if like another like third diamond comes or like a 4 card like straight comes, then those are also like similarly, assuming the board continues to kind of like another card comes that favors our range, then those are also the cards and hands we can donk bet turns with. Does that make sense to people? Kind of? Yes? I see Sun nods, Sun. Okay. Cool. We'll wrap up here with takeaways for kind of like the turn, like just turn strategy, and like probably the next one we'll cover really kind of like river strategy as well and give some examples. But really the main thing is just you want to be planning ahead. Like if you're going to bet on any street, like if you're going to bet on the flop, really start thinking about like what are the cards that come on the turn that you're going to want to bet on, what are the cards that are good for your range, what are the cards that are good for your opponent's range, and then that same concept applies for rivers as well. So knowing your good runouts and your bad runouts so that you can bluff with more intention or value bet with more intention as opposed to just kind of like blindly betting, and then really just don't auto barrel. Know the story that you're telling and always think about that as you're kind of like future planning for post-flop strategy. Okay, so that's it for today.